It's Jeff Breedlove in conversation with Mike Carnes of New Life Addiction Recovery Support Center from Americus, Georgia. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Mike, you're a leader in the Georgia recovery community. Tell us a little bit about your story personally and about New Life.
Okay, my name is Mike Carnes. Everyone calls me Big Mike. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what that means to me is it's been 18 years since I used any mind-altering substances to get through my day. Recovery is something that I didn't do when I quit using. I just quit using, and I ended up back in prison. And it was when I got out of prison I found actual recovery. So my journey was from Florida to Georgia, to Florida to Georgia, to jail, to prison, to freedom. Right. So, in around 2013, I got out of prison. I went back to school, got a GED, 2 college degrees, started volunteering at my local outpatient treatment facility, sharing my story with others, and then transitioned into working for the organization as a CPS, and then was offered position as program director of New Life Addiction Recovery Resource Center here in Americus. And now I'm the program director. Well, recently I've just been promoted to residential operating officer of the men's residential program and New Life. So it's been kind of a whirlwind over the last 10 years or so. But that's where I'm at now. And I'm super excited to see where it takes us.
And Mike, your story is unique to you, but you're part of a fraternity of brothers and sisters. That's your story is not unique because recovery is real. And you went from ping-ponging between 2 states to jail to prison, and now you're running a program. And that just shows how when you're ready for recovery is real for anybody.
For anyone, it's possible. 100%.
Absolutely. Now, Mike, you and I've talked a lot, and I think you're one of the subject matter experts on recovery in rural America. Of course, you're in rural Georgia. And for folks that don't know, down in Southwest Georgia, Georgia is the biggest state land-wise east of the Mississippi River. And so when you get down to South Georgia, it's very, very big and very rural and very agriculture-based. Agriculture is the number one industry in the state of Georgia. And the needs of people impacted by the addiction epidemic in Southwest Georgia is very typical to many parts of rural America, but it's very different than suburban America and urban America. In other words, it's very different, say, than downtown Atlanta, Georgia, or downtown San Francisco, or downtown New York City. And Mike, that's what I wanted to talk about today. And my first question is, if someone's listening to this podcast and they live in a suburban or urban big metro area, what's the first thing you would want them to know about the difference and the reality that's different between rural America and big city America?
I guess the first difference is access to things. Because I lived in Atlanta for 12 years, and now I live in rural Georgia. And in rural Georgia, there's just depending on where you're at, you're going to travel an hour or 45 minutes in any direction to get to something like a hospital or a mall or any kind of metropolitan area, and there isn't any public transportation. So you're on your own. And I know early in recovery, people don't have transportation, or they have driver's license issues or whatever going on. So they really rely on public transportation, which you have in especially downtown Atlanta. The second thing is availability to support meetings. So you might have to drive 40 miles to the closest support meeting to where you live, or walk or bicycle or whatever it is. Whereas in Atlanta, there's probably a meeting every couple of hours somewhere that you can catch a bus and get onto. Those 2 things, and then just resources. So if you're homeless, where are you going to go? Food trucks, food banks, things like that. They're so far away from where you actually are. And a lot of people don't think about that. Like, well, why don't you just go to your local food bank? Well, my local food bank might be 45 minutes from where I live, and I don't have a car, and I'm 2 months in my recovery, and it just overwhelms everyone. Another thing is access to broadband internet. So people are like, well, just get on your phone and do it online. Well, there are certain places in rural Georgia that you just can't get online. It doesn't work that way. There are places and there are whole towns that don't have broadband internet yet because it's just too far out. And that's really the biggest glaring issues that we see: is transportation distances, access to resources.
So as that manifests itself, in the absence of those services and products, what is the reality on the ground? I mean, what is that doing to people individually who are in active addiction trying to seek recovery, people in recovery trying to maintain recovery, and their families? I mean, what's the practical effect of the lack of those services?
Well, Jeff, you know as well as anybody, the key component to getting proper recovery is connection, right? And if
Right.
you were in rural Georgia and you're stigmatized, it's the Bible Belt times 5. People don't talk about their business; they keep it in house, so they by default isolate, which is one of the worst things we can do. And then by circumstance, they are also isolated. So they're isolated by geography and distance from places, and stigmatized, and don't tell nobody about Aunt Becky's secret. And we don't talk about that in this family. And that's how they're raised. The culture's a little different. And then you're trying to get your recovery, and everyone there, you talk to your pastor, and that might alienate somebody because there's a shame attached, guilt and shame. I'm not ready to talk to the pastor. That's the pastor. So it's just a different culture completely here. And I think a lot of times people forget that, and they just want to go to work. You hear the phrase, pull yourself up by the bootstrap. Well, that's how everyone is down here. Let's just get her done. And with recovery, sometimes that's just not enough. You can't just get her done through you. There's work involved, and there's a need for connection, and there's a need for support groups, and there's a need for all these things. And I think they don't understand that part.
That's fascinating to me too. I don't think a lot of us understand it the way that you and others do that live in rural America. So you have, of course, state representatives who go up to your capital, state senators. You've got mayors locally, county commissioners locally, district attorneys, sheriffs, chiefs of police. You have all these elected officials and appointed officials. What would your message be, to other elected officials and appointed officials in rural America? Dive deeper beyond just the word transportation or technology. What practically could they vote for or fund?
One thing is, pardon?
No, first, what's the first thing
the biggest impact would be mobile peer support. Because then we could, like a hub like where I'm at in Americus, and I say hub, this city has a population of 16,000 people. So it's not like we're a metropolis, but there are cities around us that have populations less than 500. But if we had a mobile transportation unit, we could go to these in-between counties that don't get attention. You being on the bus tour, you see what I'm talking about when you pull into a town and it's a traffic light and a dollar general store. A lot of people just drive through there on their way to another city. They've never stopped. So those people never get any kind of understanding or support when it comes to addiction. So we had mobile units that we could take and go to these rural counties and park in that Family Dollar parking lot and just set up. And then if people had questions, they could come up and ask us. Then we could do support groups, and then we had to schedule, and we were there every Monday at 10:30 in the morning. And then those people in that area that needed support, needed contact services, assistance with insurance, or hey, I'm ready to make a difference. Can you get me into a treatment program, or whatever? They would have a resource right there in their town every Monday to do something. So I think that's the fastest, quickest way that you can make an impact in rural Georgia, is if you could fund mobile peer support units.
No, I actually think you're right, and we know that our friends over in the Never Alone Clubhouse have a brand new unit, and it's basically an RV, and it's tremendous. So let me ask you this: when this unit rolls into town, one of the questions will be, well, what makes you think somebody will come up to a large vehicle that has addiction and recovery all over the side of it, getting past that stigma that you talked about? How do we answer critics that you could park it in the Dollar Tree parking lot all you want, no one's going to go over to it?
Well, I would argue the Georgia Recovery Bus Tour is the biggest example of a way that would show that, hey, just because a big bus pulls in your town with something on the side of it, it doesn't scare people away. They actually want to come up to it. They want to see what's going on. And then it starts the conversation. Once the conversation starts, it expands from there like a flower. It's like you're pollinating a flower. I know when we were on a couple stops, and I'll use Buena Vista as an example. We pulled up in the van, or in the bus. I pulled up, we went inside, and they were starving for resources. Did you come here and train this? Can you come? And it's just getting like, yeah, but I'm an hour away, saying we have to set something up. So it's not that they're afraid to ask. It's they don't even know where to look.
Correct. And we saw that in city after city after city. And our friends, I mean, I've traveled across rural Alabama. I've been in rural Kentucky. I've been in rural Tennessee. And it's true everywhere you go in rural America. They're starving for services.
I have another one. I have a Georgia Recovers license plate on my truck, right? And I pulled up places, and this has happened more times than I thought it would happen. Someone would come knock on my window. Hey, what's your license plate mean? I mean, well, I'm a person in long-term recovery, and that license plate's a way for me to tell everybody that recovery is real. Hey, I just 30 days clean and sober, and I was able to share with them, like, oh, or do you know where to go for a meeting? We don't know what's the closest meeting, and I'll look it up on my phone, give them the information. I've probably done that, probably do that 15, 16 times a year, just from that little license plate on the back of my truck. So if you pulled up with an RV with recovery on the side of it, I think you'd be surprised how many people would come up. And
I think the key to that is consistency, like you said, a schedule where it may take 3 or 4 times to be at the same place at the same time, but people realize that becomes part of the community. And I think you're really onto something here. So your message is bring recovery into beyond just Americas, into other communities. And I think that's something I want to talk about for a minute, because you lived in Atlanta, you said, but I spent a lot of time, I live in Atlanta, and well-intended people with great hearts will sit in an office building in Atlanta, and they'll say, well, we got to send something to rural Georgia or South Georgia. And they'll say, well, there's and I hope I say all the names the exact right way, but Albany, and there's Americas, and there's Bainbridge. Okay. But to your earlier point, and that's what I want you to talk about for a minute, we love those cities. It's not a knock on those cities at all. But to somebody in Atlanta, they may check a box and go, well, there was South Georgia. But to your point, if you can live, I mean, Quitman County or Clay County could be a solid hour and a half away from any of those cities that we just named. And if you can't get there, you might as well be on Pluto.
Yeah.
Talk about the reality of what life is like deeper for people in recovery in rural Georgia that city people just may not get.
So I'll use Americas as an example. We're a city that's an hour from Warner Robins and 40 minutes from Albany and an hour from Columbus, right? So if you just use us as a star, but around us, there's Ideal, Buena Vista, Reynolds, all these Fort Valley, Ellaville. I mean, go on and on and on. Smithville, Lee County. Lee County is between Sumter County and Dougherty County, and it's nothing but farmlands, the entire place. But it is actually listed as an urban county when you look at it statistically by the metrics, because all the people who live there work in Albany because it's cheaper to live in Lee County, but it's close enough for them to commute into work in Albany. So by their income, things like that, and their growth rate, they've been listed as an urban county. But if you drive through Lee County, there's nothing there. There's no city, right? It's Albany. Albany is in the south part of the county. But all those counties, there's a town here, DeSoto, and there's an incorporated town right after that that's like, I think it's 2.2 miles wide and 2.2 miles long, the whole city. And they're incorporated. They have a library, they have a mayor, so they have probably 30 people, but they're 20 minutes away from Americas. So if you have people in cities like that, how do they get to a meeting? There's no meeting in DeSoto. There's no meeting in the middle of Lee County. They have to get to Albany, or they have to get to Americus, or they have to get to Warner Robins, or they have to get to Columbus to catch a meeting. And if you're in that middle area, it's just not happening. Like it's a lot, gas money, right? Reliable transportation, being able to go, and you still got to work and feed your kids and pay your rent. Like it's just, there's no convenience to it whatsoever. Whereas in Atlanta, like I said, there's probably a meeting every hour or two somewhere in Atlanta you can catch a bus to.
And to your to the other point, there's not necessarily stable broadband internet connection where you can just have a virtual meeting, because that just doesn't exist. I don't know that everybody appreciates that.
Yeah, I did a bunch of research for the rally last year, and the broadband internet connection in Atlanta was like 98%. And down here in some counties, it dips down to like 80% of the county. So that means 20% of that county doesn't have internet.
Wow.
So that's a huge amount in a rural county. Overdose death rates. People tend to look at these numbers and they're like, oh man, look at the overdose death rate in Atlanta. It's 17.3. And then you go down to a little small county that nobody's ever heard of, and their death rate's 30.6 or 64.9, because it's per 100,000 people. So if you have 4 overdose deaths in a county that's got 40 people in it, that's a huge problem, right? So
no, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's, and it's those kind of things that I think get missed at the Capitol.
Absolutely. No, I think so. I want to get 2 topics before we run out of time. Talking to Mike Carnes with New Life Addiction Recovery Support Center based out of Americus, Georgia. Mike is a true leader, a thought leader and a policy leader and a community leader on the Georgia recovery community, especially in rural Georgia. He's a true expert. Mike, let's talk for a minute. When Georgia unveiled their 988, which is now, that's a national situation. But when they did their test pilot programs, one of them was Southwest Georgia. And the thinking was that most of the calls would come from Metro Atlanta in the pilot. But the fact of the matter is that most of the calls came from Southwest Georgia.
Correct. And their infrastructure was not set up for it.
Right. But even still, why do you think so many people from rural America reached out to 988? What's going on that there would even be that volume of calls?
Well, I mean, it's just so say you have a farm and your whole family is farmers, and then you hit a drought and you lose half your crops. And now the bank's foreclosing on your house. They're trying to come take your combine. They're trying to take all your tractors off your property because you've been in debt and you're counting on that harvest to pay all this debt off. The suicide rates go up. Um, Unrecognized mental health conditions because people don't want to talk about it and they just put Johnny out in the back shed, not realizing that he has schizophrenia. They just think he's a little off, Johnny's just a little off, and they don't have access to the resources they need to get Johnny early intervention. And I think that's really why you have that tremendous thing for 988 happening, because there's no way for early intervention, right? School systems aren't set up very well for it. Smaller high schools, smaller 1A and 2A schools, less teachers, less oversight. So that one student might just never leave his property, right? Their family property out there forever until it gets to the point he has a psychotic break, and then nobody knows what to do. So they call 988. And now here's the bad part about calling 988. It might be 3 hours before they can get somebody out to you. That's not law enforcement. Because
I do want to say in Georgia that number's a little bit better than that, but you're right. I mean, it can take a while, and all of that. Let's talk about that really quick too on the hurricane. I mean, with a natural disaster, it doesn't have to be a hurricane. It could be a tornado. It could be in some parts of the country, because this is being listened to coast to coast. I mean, it could be whatever a natural disaster is in that part of the country. But when one of those and they're all devastating, but when a particularly historic storm comes through, to your point about fifth generation farmers, what do you see on the ground with the disconnect or the connect after a major storm on how the state government, the faith community, the private sector is able to bring resources in?
So what I saw happen after this last hurricane that came through is it'll knock out the infrastructure of that small town, right? So your phone lines are down, internet, broadband's gone, everything, right? Well, they're relying on their mental health folks to go to the closest, let's say, crisis center, right? Or crisis hospital. Well, that crisis hospital might be 2.5 hours away, but all the roads were blocked. So now you also can't get your medicines to your pharmacies. You can't get in and out of where you need to go. So all these people that have a mental health crisis have nowhere to go. So what you see is an outpour in the communities of a bunch of people coming together to feed people, pray for people, or churches will come down. They're trying to clear the roads. They're trying to do all these other things. And a lot of it is because people just couldn't get to you. Like emergency service couldn't get you. FEMA couldn't get in there. The roads were so devastated. So everybody's worried about that. But what about that addict that was at his house and he's going through withdrawals and there's no one there for him and he's doubled over in his bed? Can't get to the Suboxone clinic for his mat. There's just so many problems with it. I don't even know what's the worst one. I don't know if it'll be the mental health thing, the substance abuse thing, access to hospitals, access to emergency rooms for medical problems. I mean, it was a disaster here in the rural Georgia.
No, that's absolutely the case. And those are great points that I hadn't thought about. Like, you can't even get the medicines to the pharmacies. And what about the person in active addiction that's alone at that moment, who happens to be on their journey at that moment, going through stuff where they need the same type of medical care and attention that a cancer survivor needs their medicine, or a diabetic needs their daily medicine?
100%.
100%. So last point on that before we wrap up, what would be your message to our state leadership about prioritizing a plan, just like they prioritize a plan to rebuild the infrastructure? Then they have a plan to rebuild, buildings. what is your message about making sure there's a plan to rebuild people who become, maybe they weren't in addiction before it happened, but they start suffering depression and stuff because of the, how does the state rebuild people after something that devastating in rural America?
You have to get people with lived experiences out there to be with those people somehow, some way. More RCOs in these smaller counties, mobile peer support, mental health, and substance abuse CPSs. It's not just us. There, there's cases for mental health as well. But we got to get to where they're at because they can't get to where we're at. So if we can bring the message of recovery and hope to these rural areas, I mean, that's how you rebuild people. Really, is you go down there and you love on them.
Excellent. Well, look, one more question before we wrap this up. I do want to ask you this. I've asked you a couple of times about your message to state leaders, to people outside of rural America. What I want to ask you now is, what do you say to somebody who lives in rural America, whether it's rural Georgia, rural Texas, rural Iowa, rural New York State? It doesn't matter, about the stigma around addiction and mental health, and the ability, even if we have to do better on getting resources, there are resources and there are people with lived experience. What's your message to someone in rural America that it's okay, or is it okay? I shouldn't preference your answer, to reach out and find support. What do you say to somebody?
I don't really try to say anything except I try to make myself available, make my center doors open as much as possible to let them walk their path, and then just not be judgmental when we talk to them. I don't want to feel sorry for them. I want to understand them. I want to use empathy over sympathy, and I want to be able to just provide a safe, inclusive environment where they feel comfortable coming. I think if we can do that and across the state, um, we can reduce some of the stigma. I think that's part of the problem is it's not as easy to walk into a clinical environment as it is to walk into an RCO or a community center or something like that, right? Because it's a little intimidating to walk in and it's all these clinicians and professional people uh and you're just out of the pickup truck with your boots on and everybody else is in suits and ties and you don't feel comfortable. So just bring it down a notch, right? And just be accessible. I think that's what we need. We just need more people doing more kindness in more ways.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, look, we have time for just one more thing. And I just want to say to everybody that Michael was the driving force behind, in the state of Georgia, the first rural recovery rally. And it's 4 or 5 years old now. And it started during COVID. It's 5 years old now. And we weren't even sure we could have something. And we found a place that was COVID appropriate. And we weren't even sure anybody would show up, even though we knew the building was okay. It was basically an ag building with big openings, and it was all good with a roof. But people did come, and they came the next year and the year after that. And, Michael, just want to say, first of all, thank you for your leadership in building a legacy like that in rural Georgia. But what would you say to somebody who works in the recovery space in rural America, that the value of having some type of rally to show support? Just real quick, tell them why the rural recovery rally in Georgia has been so successful from your perspective.
From my perspective, the reason it's so successful is because we are all so hungry to help people and to bring awareness to the needs we have in rural Georgia, that we come together. 'Cause it's 10 organizations, it's probably 11 or 12 organizations now that come together to make this thing work. Because all of us in our little pockets of rural Georgia have the same issue. It's the same, we all have the same problem because we can't reach enough people. And this is a way to kind of bring light to it. And we're this year, it's our fifth year. We will be in Dublin, Georgia this year instead of the traditional place where we were doing it, because we want to move it around rural Georgia and make it accessible to other people and let other legislators see it in different areas. And we switched directors this year. I stepped down and Ashley Black has stepped up. It will be February 21st in Dublin, Georgia. So mark that on your calendars. Pay attention to our Facebook page, Rural Recovery Rally. We will be doing updates and flyers. I know the save the date thing's going out today. Or it'll have the address on it and the date. We got to do a couple little button up housekeeping things to get you the exact time we're going to start, but I think we are going to go from 12 to 3, but don't quote me on that day. And we just encourage anybody in the rural recovery areas to reach out to us, rural recovery rally at gmail.com, and let us know, set up a table, let us amplify our voice. That's really,
and I would certainly echo that. And just to keep it realistic, but if you're listening to this in Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, one of the states that actually borders Georgia, and you don't have to buy a plane ticket, and you're a recovery leader, it's worth getting in your car and coming and watching this and seeing how you can structure something in your state. It's also worth it if you're in rural Oregon, get on a plane. But I mean, practically speaking, if you can get here as a rural recovery leader, you should come, you should see how this works, and you should build one in your state because it's tremendous. Mike Carnes, Big Mike, as he's affectionately called, New Life Addiction Recovery Support Center. Mike, how do they find New Life on social media?
So we have a social media page on Facebook. It's New Life Addiction Recovery Resource Center on Facebook.com. You can also find us through our parent organization, Mental Flint Health and Wellness. They have a webpage at mentalflinthw.org, I do believe. I'd have to look it up again. But you could just Google Mental Flint Health and Wellness, it will pop up. I have a Twitter page. The Rural Recovery has its own Facebook page, and it's Rural Recovery and on Facebook, Rural Recovery Rally on Facebook. So you can give us a call, 229-815-1169. That's our office number. Leave us a message. We'll try to get back with you. And yeah, so we're just here trying to make lives different and better for people. We're open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. We offer support groups. We have meditation classes once a week. We have art therapy, transportation services for people with addiction issues. We have a clothing closet. We have a food bank. We have an awesome place for you just to come get loved on. If you just want to do something besides sit at your house and you just want to be around some other awesome people, just come by and say hi.
Well, there's nobody that leads more than Big Mike. So use him as a resource, no matter where you are in this country. Check him out. He's a true leader. He is a subject matter expert and a strong advocate for peers and families and communities that have been impacted by addiction. Mike, thanks for your time today. Thanks for your leadership. And as we always say, recovery is real.
Recovery is real.